I guess the one thing I was surprised by was Mitchell goes from one small market to another. It did seem like the New York thing was, didn't you feel like it was just going to always be New York?
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. When we've talked, whether it's on the air or off the air, the amount of hours that we've spent talking about how teams would be like, hey, they're going to hand the keys to this guy because of the relationship and make sure it always happens. The Knicks ended up, well, I guess you could argue the relationship got him Brunson, but that's not what the expectation was. And not to say that, like, from now on, no owner should give an agent the keys to the franchise, but like the Leon Rose CAA thing, like this was supposed to, hey, you're in charge because you're going to have this relationship. And, you know, some of the staff that they had done on some of the guys that we'd always heard, oh, you know, that's going to be the guy, that's going to be the guy that Knicks go after. But
what would you have given up, though? Because
well, here's do you want to do this now?
If it's Barrett and 3 unprotected picks, I'm not doing it. I'm just not. I'd rather have Barrett. I'd rather have the picks and the capital for a trade down the road with the next unhappy superstar who's going to, by the way, be available probably in 2 months. We have seen now with this league 5 times a year, somebody's unhappy and available. So do they have to go all in on Donovan Mitchell? It's like, no, there's more stars coming. You're still a big market. You have a lot of assets. They have a lot of players people like, even people like Quickly and Grimes. Like those guys have some value. And I wouldn't have done it. And I actually thought it was smart to lock down Barrett and basically say, all right, he's not in the trade now. Because people were saying like, oh, he could be in if it's a poison pill. Get out of here. That's happened like once. They locked him down and they basically played chicken with Utah. And then Utah's like, all right, fine. But if I'm Utah, I can't be psyched about getting all of these Cleveland picks when that is like one of the best future teams we have. I just don't know what those picks, I think it's a good trade for them. It's probably the best one available, but I don't know if those picks ever amount to anything.
Okay, but Shams did report that RJ and Quickly and 2 unprotected were offered. And if that was offered to me and I'm Utah,
I'm taking it.
Every day of the week, I'd rather have that deal than this Cleveland deal.
100%. So
what happened?
So it seems like Cleveland was in for a split second. They came out.
They did a public, like, hey, we're done here. Like one of those deals.
Yeah, but they really weren't. They was like, yeah, I'm out. I left the restaurant. And then you like circle around, you come in the back. It just seems like Windhorst was saying that there was some bad blood, maybe because of the Barrett extension with the Knicks and Jazz, because they had spent so much time on the deal. I don't know if that's true, but I trust Windhorst. I think he has good sources, especially with some of those teams. But it does feel like if I'm Utah, like if we're advising Danny, 100 times out of 100, I'm taking RJ in the 2 picks. I think RJ is really good. And I think he gives a shit. I think he's gotten better every single year. And I like the upside with him.
I'm going to ask you, like, do GMs just want more unprotected picks and don't care about the player? Because at some point I would, like as the GM, I go, which player am I getting that I like out of this group? And to RJ in comparison to these other 3 guys that I do want to spend some time on, it's not close. Maybe you and I like RJ too much. I'm with you. I felt like I saw something from him, just his mentality, the way he played this year. A light went off with him.
Yeah.
And, maybe he ends up not being a number 2 on a great team. But the fact I'm even thinking it's possible would make me on the other end go, I want RJ Barrett. I don't care about these other guys. I don't care about a 3rd unprotected and some pick swaps that probably aren't going to happen anyway.
I want RJ Barrett and I want Knicks picks because I'm betting on the 21st century of the Knicks, which is that they've sucked every year and they've had 2 good moments in 22 years and the ownership's weird and there's a new person running the team every 3 years. Instead, I'm betting on the Cleveland picks where you have Mobley and Garland and Jared Allen and none of them are going anywhere. And now I have Mitchell on that team and there is just no variable now that team is going to go in the tank unless there's like a bus crash because they have 4 guys that they can build around and they can get more. They can get Kevin Love. Like, as we said, they can flip him into something. They can always flip LeVert as an expiring.
LeVert's still on.
Free agents. If you're a free agent, if you're like the Jay Crowder of the free agency, like that swing guy who's like 32 years old, who wants to be on a great team, who's a 3-and-D guy, Cleveland's on your list now. It's like I could be on that team. I get to shoot wide open threes. I get to play with Evan Mobley. So I think we see that the same. I think that Knicks pick, that Knicks trade, if that was the offer, I like it more. But to answer your question about why do teams value these unprotected picks, because it buys the GM time. We always talk about this. You can't say anything. You have the job now for 5 years, because what are people going to say? They're not going to be able to judge you on the players you have. This is kind of like Presti's black magic with OKC a little bit, even though I think we both think Presti's amazing. But the more picks you accumulate and the more potential and the more, this guy maybe, sort of, kind of, you just get to keep your job. And I do think that's part of this.
During the tanking fest, which has corrected itself a bit here, but that could also be cyclical based on, what the rosters look like. It's funny because Cerruti and I were even talking about this the other day. We were talking about Westbrook, which I don't want to spend a ton of time on, but it was just, usually there's always like a couple teams, maybe 3 and 4, that are so desperate and so talentless that they would just be like, fine, who cares? Let's sell some tickets, sell some jerseys.
Right.
And now
like Charlotte this year.
Right. But like all the bad teams are interesting enough with some of the picks that they've stockpiled in a very short amount of time, where it's like, even if I'm a bad team, I don't want to bring in Westbrook to disrupt things. So if you go back to like prime tanking years where it felt like a third of the league was already hoping to lose every single game, other GMs, and I'm sure you had the same conversations, the amount of resentment from the GMs are like, I'm trying to win games here. And this guy gets to keep his job and like get an extension if he's awful after year 3 or 4. And I do think the picks are part of that. The Presti part of it, where I always hear, again, it's just out there in the ether of like, well, how come everybody was always on Hinkie but not Presti? Do I need to spend more than 30 seconds explaining that to you? Like, Presti's built up enough equity. He'd already had a run. He had a really successful group. Hinkie was an unknown. And from day one, it was embarrassing, the rosters he was putting out there, even though that was what he was trying to do. That's why the Ainge part of this, because I completely agree with the job security of having all these picks into the future. And it looks good. It's all these different announcements. Hell, if sports writers are going to give you props for second rounders, what are they going to do when you have 7 unprotected and 4 more swaps that might not even mean anything? But Ainge isn't that guy, all right? Ainge is a god in Utah. This was with a job everybody knew he was going to get for a really long time. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. All of us knew this was happening. Ryan Smith, the owner, loves him. They're golf buddies. And so for Ainge to go, hey, I have all these picks, I could see it if it was a different GM, but we're talking about somebody who's played and won championships, is a much better GM than he got credit for, and was far better positioned with this roster with Boston on his way out, despite people asking if he actually should be fired, which now kind of a year removed from that looks like a joke, considering how set up that team is. And now he's in Utah, and I'm like, I'm surprised. I'm surprised. I wouldn't think that he would prioritize the picks in a way somebody who's more unproven is. Like, I'm not saying that he doesn't want the picks, because clearly it's because of the Gobert thing, but I guess, like, would Ainge tell us, hey, I actually like Colin Sexton, think he's just as good as RJ Barrett? That's hard for me to believe. That's just hard for me to believe. And that the value, even if he thought there was a gap, that the value of the extra third pick, because you're absolutely right. Another first rounder unprotected from Cleveland, what would the odds be from a bookmaker on like, hey, how good are the picks going to be from Cleveland in 3 or 4 years versus what they'd be with the Knicks, even with Mitchell?
Well, it's like when Milwaukee traded all those picks for Drew Holiday, and it's like, well, Giannis is going to be in the team. I don't know what you think's going to happen with those picks.
I still thought that was a lot of picks.
Yeah, but unless you could kidnap Giannis. I think with Utah, part of what just to be fair to them, if they're in the Wembanyama sweepstakes, which it's really them and it's San Antonio, who are the 2 teams that have gone, I think, all in on this now, at least for this year. And there'll probably be a couple teams that will unfold as we, head to December, January.
And there's still like some moves to be made here if you're Utah too, with whether it's Bogdanovich or Conley or like before camp opens up. But
you have to keep getting rid of those guys. I think maybe they were worried Barrett comes in and now you have enough kind of decent players. Like, they still have good players and decent players in their roster. And I just wonder if, like, is Colin Sexton a safer bet if you're tanking?